Actions speak louder than words. And today, while we're talking about making children healthier, there's a way you can make it happen. The Royal Children's Hospital Foundation supports research, education and expertise that impacts generations of children. And with generous support from the Good Friday Appeal, together they make this podcast possible. Every single dollar is an investment in healthy children. Search the Royal Children's Hospital Foundation to show your support. Hi, I'm Dr Anthea Rhodes, paediatrician here at the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne, and your host today on the Kids Health Info podcast. In the latest National Child Health Poll, we asked parents and teenagers across Australia all about diets and nutrition. And to talk about some of the interesting things we learned and questions that you have, today we've got one of our paediatric dietitians, Tayla Rabie. Thanks for joining us, Tayla.
Thanks for having me.
From the Royal Children's Hospital Melbourne, this is the Kids Health Info podcast.
So we talk about food all the time, Tayla, because it's something that we all do every day, eating. When it comes to teenagers, the poll tells us that actually some of the basics we really still don't understand. Can you talk us through the food groups and what the recommendations are?
Yeah, absolutely. It does get really confusing, but we go off the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating. There is a lot of other countries that have their own guidelines, but the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating says that most of our intake should come from vegetables, then fruits, so 5 serves of vegetables a day, 2 fruits. This is in general. It does change a little bit based on age group. 2.5 serves of protein, but lean protein such as lean beef or chicken, fish, eggs, poultry, so pulses, lentils, tofu. And we want to have 2.5 to 3 serves, depending on the age and gender, of low-fat dairy, so milk and yogurts. That's really important for our bones, especially for our teenagers, as well as we want some fats as well, so olive oils, avocado, those types of fats to be added to our foods is important for growing brains and developing brains. So all of it's really important, as well as those discretionary or sometimes foods like takeaway foods and lollies and chips. That also plays a role in the diet as a sometimes food, but it is definitely something that we should be incorporating and enjoying as part of our diet too.
Okay, so lots of information there. You deal with families and talk about food every day. Where do you find they're getting their information from?
I would say that they're getting their information from Instagram and TikTok and influencers. It can be really difficult to navigate it all. There is so much information and it's really technical, the information that's provided, so it's hard to navigate. But at the end of the day, it is really important that the broad food groups are the basics, and that's what we focus on. And we want to have a range of different foods in our diet every day to make sure we get the most micronutrient coverage as we can, because each food has different profile of micronutrients and macronutrients like protein, carbohydrates and fat. So if we have a range of foods from all the different food groups, our needs are going to be met.
Okay, and can you tell us a bit more about what micronutrients are? What do you mean by that?
So micronutrients are things like vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, A, zinc, B12, all of those type of micronutrients important for different parts of the body processes. So whether it's going to be helping with your red blood cells, whether it's your skin and hair and nails, it's all important, and it's found in different ranges of our food in the best way that it can be absorbed in the body. So if we have supplements, it might not be absorbed in the same way as if we got it from real foods.
So if someone has a typical diet that includes a good range of all those different food groups, they should be getting enough of those micronutrients that you've talked about, and then also the macronutrients for their energy and other things as well.
Yeah, unless I would never recommend supplementing unless there is a blood test that shows us that they're deficient, because generally people meet their needs in one way or another if they're having a broad and varied diet.
Okay, so it feels like it should be straightforward, but somehow it always ends up quite complicated when it comes to food. We asked our listeners to give us some of their questions, knowing that you're here today, so we're going to have a listen now and pick your brain for some answers.
Our first question today comes from Marie, and Marie says, my daughter is constantly snacking after school but then barely touches dinner. Is this a problem, and how can I structure snacks so that they don't ruin meals?
Snacking, is it really a bad thing or is it okay?
It depends. I think snacking is important, and it's really common for kids to be hungry after school. They've just done a massive day of learning, running around talking with friends, and after school, of course, you're going to be hungry, and snacks are important to make sure that you can get through to dinner and have a good sustaining meal then. But I think we run the risk of grazing after school, which I think is probably more concerning rather than snacking. So if you have a snack that is high in fibre, so you get that from your fruits, your vegetables, that's really satiating, so it makes you feel fuller for longer. So, for example, if you have some fruit and some vegetable sticks with some dip and things like cheese and biscuits, that will keep you fuller to last you to dinner, rather than having a little bit of popcorn, a little bit of pretzels, which are very high in carbohydrates, but won't really take you the long haul until dinner. But I think there is nothing wrong with snacking as long as it's kind of confined, whether that's a time of the day that you, every day after school at 4 p.m, you're offered one snack. But also I'd be kind of thinking about why are they so hungry after school. It's really common. We find these days that kids don't want to eat at school for a wide variety of reasons, including that they're just so busy. Like there's no time. They want to play with friends. They want to chat with friends. Sometimes they are a bit uncomfortable to eat in front of their peers, or it's kind of part of their school routine not to. In which case I would be kind of considering, are they going to school with a full stomach, with a balanced meal before school? Are they having snacks at school? Are they eating at school? And kind of trying to nut out gently what are the reasons potentially that they might not be full from school and school lunches and snacks. So making sure that the snacks and the lunches that you provide or they make for school have carbohydrates, fats and proteins, as well as fibre, to make them full and satiate them for the rest of the day.
Okay, so you've talked through the main food groups there that you want to include in a good lunch or perhaps in a snack. Can you talk us through some examples of that? So what would a lunch look like? A couple of different examples that have all of those food groups covered.
So whether that be a whole meal sandwich with some avocado, some cheese, some roast chicken in there, or even if you have a thermos from your meal the day before with like a stir fry, or even some spaghetti and meatballs, something like that.
Leftovers are a good option.
Leftovers, yeah. It doesn't have to be too complicated, but we want to make sure it's not just something like a bread roll, because a white bread roll, because realistically that gets absorbed really quickly in the body, and the energy comes in a really quick burst, and therefore it's going to drop really fast, and your child, the teenager, will be hungry very quickly, and it won't keep them until that afternoon snack.
Okay, great. And one more thing on snacks. So if you know you've got a teenager who's often hungry after school, maybe they're going from school to sports practice, what sort of snacks would you recommend that they have packed, ready to eat in that time period?
The muesli bar, if there's a flavoured milk, that's actually really good. I think they get a bad rap, but a little bit of sugar added to add flavouring into a milk is a really good option that will keep them fuller for longer. Cheese and biscuits, kind of one thing that will sustain for a little bit longer, or even a piece of fruit, some vegetables, or crackers and dip. Things like that are easy to grab on the run, or even banana, but small enough to not ruin the appetite for dinner.
Great tips, thank you. Okay, let's hear the next question.
Our next question comes from Lyle, and Lyle says, my 15-year-old daughter prefers to eat in her room rather than with the family. Is this something that I should be worried about?
Such a common situation. I've got 2 teenagers at home myself, and they always want to load stuff up in the kitchen and then disappear to their bedrooms. Is this a problem?
Adolescents and teenagers are developing independence, and also spending time with the family might not be as exciting, especially after a long day of socialising, and they might just want some me time. I think it is important to kind of nut that out with them to see what the reason is that they want to spend some time away and eat by themselves. But family meal times are really important. We know that it helps with socialization, improve diet quality. Having the family together also really, it can create the family values, which are really important to bind the family together. If they're taking food to the room, are they just taking snacks? Are you just kind of coming in the next day to clean their room and there's just lots of wrappers on the floor? In which case, potentially, there might be better options that they can grab that might fill them up a little bit. They've got more nutritious options available in the fridge to grab. But I think even introducing family meals 2-3 times a week is better than nothing. We're not aiming for perfection, but something is better. And I think we can't expect our adolescent to sit for family meals if there's not a precedent already set for everyone to do that. It can't just be on them. It has to be a family value that you keep. But it is really important. And I think it does get a little bit tricky as to what to navigate, kind of the red flags we'd look for if a child or an adolescent was going to their room to eat. We'd be wondering kind of, are they avoiding eating in front of other people? Does that make them anxious? I would be kind of exploring some things that would make me concerned to tell parents to go to their GP and request some extra help, such as kind of hoarding food. So if you go in and there's food rotting there that hasn't been eaten, is the adolescent taking food upstairs that's a bit different to usual? So are they excluding certain food groups? Are they serving themselves smaller portions than usual? And is it kind of getting in the way of their day-to-day life? Are they trying to avoid going out with friends and socialising? Because those types of things are something that would warrant some extra help to investigate. But something about family meal times, it's a good time to actually connect with your teen and adolescent to create that rapport and foundation to be able to ask them those difficult questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things I know with my teenagers is they want to sit in their rooms and eat so they can still be on a screen. So they might have their phone or their laptop, whereas by getting everyone out to the table, as you say, not necessarily achievable every night, but when you can, screens away, and that's for us as adults too, to really kind of focus on sitting around, connecting and enjoying mealtime together.
Absolutely.
All right, let's hear the next question.
This question is from Sean, and Sean says, my teen keeps asking for more say in what the family eats. How can I get him involved in meal planning in a way that's empowering but also realistic for our busy schedule?
Something we've learnt from the poll is that teenagers do want to get involved in learning how to cook and prepare food, but parents don't think that their teenager really wants to, is that engaged too. So I think giving them the opportunity, empowering them to make some decisions of what the family eats is a really good thing. It helps prepare them for adulthood where they're going to be cooking for themselves. But at the same time, the parent is the parent. The parent chooses what the family's going to eat that day. So there is something that we refer to called division of responsibility. So parents decide what's going to be on offer, what time it's going to be on offer, and the adolescent can choose how much they eat and if they eat at all. So there is some responsibility on the teenager, and as they get older, that responsibility will increase. But it is really important that as parents, you're making sure that the food that you do choose to prepare is nutritious and is balanced across all the food groups. But I think some practical things you could look at introducing is potentially at the beginning of the week, you go through and do some meal prep ideas, and they're involved with the supermarket shopping and coming up with maybe 1 or 2 ideas of dinners to make that week. Or some families do like a Friday night or a Saturday night, the adolescent picks a meal to eat. So whether that's making family homemade pizzas or something like that, they have some avenue to be able to develop new skills and have some autonomy and independence in what they want to eat. But at the same time, most of it is still as per the parents and what they think is fit for their child.
Yeah, great. And I know in our house when our teenagers cook, we usually say that means they don't have to clean up. So that can sometimes be a motivator for them as well. Whereas if I'm cooking, then usually I try and get them involved in cleaning up. So sometimes they decide they'd rather cook. Excellent. The next thing we want to talk about is myths. So when it comes to nutrition and diet, there's lots of myths out there, and I'm sure you hear them all the time, Tayla. If you could set the record straight on, I guess, one of the most common things you hear in relation to teenagers at the moment when it comes to diet, what is it?
Supplements are something that comes up all the time in clinic. Teenagers want protein supplements or even micronutrient supplements as well. But the protein is important, and I think figuring out why the adolescent or the teenager wants supplements, what are their goals? Are they looking for muscle gain or anything like that? But you don't need supplements. Teenagers don't need supplements unless they're elite sports people, in which case they should see an accredited sports dietitian to give them specific advice. But generally, we, as an Australian society, 98% of Australians are not deficient in protein. So there is no problem. And of the people who are deficient, it's very unwell individuals. So for a healthy general adolescent, it really isn't a problem. And it can be achieved through having whole foods. So rather get the protein from lean meats, fish, eggs, tofu, beans, all of those types of food have protein in it, and make sure to spread it across the day as well, in which case our muscles can use it more rapidly for muscle gain and maintenance, because if we're going to give it a big whack, it's not all going to be used and stored by our muscles. Some of it will be used as energy as well. So I would say that protein supplements are expensive and not necessary for our teenagers. And vitamin supplementation also, it can be achieved through a varied diet. And often it just results in expensive pee because you peed out. Many vitamins are water soluble, so it's not stored in the body. So you can save your money and you can use it elsewhere. And I think that our social media makes it really hard and a lot of pressure on teenagers to, invest in those things. But it isn't necessary for muscle gains or maintenance. And you can achieve it through eating whole foods.
Okay, that's really great advice, because we definitely see marketing all the time, particularly at the moment for protein. So we often see on packets the number of grams of protein that might be contained in a food product, and maybe that's part of what is encouraging people to purchase. Can you set the record straight on how much protein typically a teenager, boy or girl, might need, and what that is in terms of a serve in a diet?
A teenager would need about 2.5 serves of protein. You can see the exact serving suggestions because it does get a little bit confusing on the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating website, or AGHE. But essentially, one serve could be a palm-sized piece of lean beef, or a chicken breast, or an egg. So it's really achievable and it's not massive amounts. Just that is enough protein within it, but it also contains micronutrients as well. It contains fibre to keep you fuller for longer. So protein is not just the grams of protein for muscle gain, it's a lot bigger than that. And we have to think of foods not just as their nutrients, but as their food groups. That makes things a lot easier.
So then you'll get a whole lot of benefits just from various serves of different things, rather than narrowing it right down to grams of particular types of food.
And it also gets rid of the enjoyment of food. Food is so much more than micronutrients. It's culture, it's family, it's enjoyment. Every food has a role to play in a teenager and all adults' diets as well. And by minimising it to something as small as grams, you get rid of a lot of positive attributes about food.
That's so true. Such helpful advice, Tayla. Thank you so much for coming along to chat to us today. Lots of helpful tips for families, and definitely setting the record straight on some of those myths that are out there for teenagers at the moment.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Information in this podcast is general in nature and is intended to support, not replace, discussions with your doctor or healthcare professional. If you have concerns about your child, please consult your local healthcare professional for individual advice. This podcast is recorded on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay respects to their elders. Kids Health Info is funded thanks to the support of the Royal Children's Hospital Good Friday Appeal.